Hello, my name's Gary Ford, Managing Director of Tiger Hobbies Limited, UK hobby importers and distributors, and welcome to episode 6 of the Pacific War Part 2, the death of the battleship and the sinking of the Super Battleship Yamato. In July 1854, a 13-year-old boy called John Arbuthnot Fisher joined the Royal Navy as a cadet on HMS Victory, Nelson's flagship. He would go on to become one of the most influential naval officers in history. Known as Jackie Fisher, he joined HMS Calcutta in 1854, one of the last all-sail ships of the line with muzzle-loading guns. He witnessed floggings and took part in the Baltic blockade of the Russians during the Crimean War. So it would seem not much difference from Nelson's navy. Promoted to midshipman in 1856, he impressed his officers with his quick learning, and by 1860 he'd passed the first parts of his lieutenant's exam and was promoted to the rank of mate on his 19th birthday. By 1869 he was promoted to commander at only 28 after a period as a gunnery instructor on HMS Warrior. It was here he started an interest in torpedoes that were first demonstrated as early as 1807 as contact mines. By 1864 the modern self-propelled Whitehead torpedo was already in design. Jackie Fisher was fascinated by naval technology, and in the early 1870s helped form the Royal Navy Torpedo Establishment and the purchase of the first Whitehead torpedoes for the Royal Navy. It may have been influenced by the US Civil War, such as ironclads and early submarines. Also, one of the lesser known battles, the Battle of Lissa, the last use of ramming and the first use of ironclads in Europe in about 1866. By 1877, Fisher was a captain RN and in command of his first warship, but within 3 years he was given command of one of the Royal Navy's first large steam-driven battleships, HMS Inflexible, armed with the largest guns, but still had sailing masts until they were removed in 1885. Fisher became Director of Ordnance for the Navy, helping develop quick-firing guns to defend against torpedo boats, and in 1890 promoted to Rear Admiral. As a senior naval officer, Jackie Fisher started to influence naval development, including better torpedoes, gunnery, officer training, and the process of speeding up warship building. By 1904, he was the first Sea Lord and oversaw the entry into service of one of the most important weapon systems in modern warfare of the time, the all-big gun, fully armoured battleship HMS Dreadnaught and its faster but lighter armoured brother, the battle cruiser. In one foul stroke, Admiral Jackie Fisher made all other navies totally obsolete and Great Britain the most powerful naval force in the world. But it also started one of the greatest arms race of all time, leading to the Great War in 1914, which Fisher correctly predicted the year in 1908. He also asked King Edward VII to carry out a preemptive strike against the Germans' high seas fleet whilst it lay at port in a kind of early Pearl Harbor without declaring war, but Edward VII told him no. By 1914 the arms race had resulted in the building of 92 battleships and battle cruisers in the world. In 1903, in a shed in the USA, two bicycle men called the Wright brothers built and flew a stringy wooden thing, not much more than I think about 100 metres under its powered flight for the very first time. Some took an interest though, but it would not bother the 15,000-ton monster battleships, would it? In 1905 the world was shocked when the Japanese, who used fairly modern fleet of kind of pre-Dreadnought warships to absolutely batter the Imperial Russian Navy by 21-0 and captured 7 Russian warships, making the world stand up and notice their men from the Far East. In the Great War, everyone expected a massive win-or-lose battle between the great Dreadnought fleets of the Germans' High Seas Fleet and the Royal Navy's Grand Fleet to pulverise each other in a decisive battle. In the spring or late spring of 1916, it kind of happened at the Battle of Jutland, where the Royal Navy suffered a tactical defeat but a strategic victory, as over 250 warships clashed, resulting in the loss of 6,000 killed for the Royal Navy and 113,000 tons sunk, compared to 2,500 killed and 62,000 sunk for the German High Seas Fleet. The Germans, though, scuttled back to their port, never to come out again. And the Royal Navy, despite its losses, ruled the North Sea, blockading the German fleet in their port. It also resulted in one of the youngest VCs in history, that of 16-year-old boy first class John Travers Cornwall, or Jack, who won his VC staying at his guns whilst mortally wounded. There would be clashes of warships during the rest of the war, but nothing on the scale of Jutland. It also saw many firsts for naval aviation. The first combat launch from a carrier, HMS Furious, in July 1918, and the first sinking of a ship by an aircraft in 1915 when a French submarine was sunk by an Austro-Hungarian seaplane. Also in 1915, a Royal Navy Short 184 seaplane used an air-launched torpedo to sink a ship at Gallipoli. So, the stringy wooden thing was coming of age. Just after the Great War in the USA, Brigadier General Billy Mitchell was trying to defend the fledgling US Army Air Service and proposed a number of demonstrations that the aircraft could defeat the battleship and sink these monsters of the seas. Senior naval officers did not like the thought of their beloved battle wagons being sunk by the wooden stringy things, and stating, in the open ocean, an aircraft would pose no threat to the battleships at speed at seas. The demonstrations were held in 1921 after the US Navy fixed on its own demonstrations in 1920. These included the strafing by SE-5 fighters to simulate the suppression of AA crews on the decks. Dive bombing and high-level bombing were also used. The captured German ships were sunk, but the Navy and senior armour officers stated this would not really happen in actual combat, as the damaged repair parties would have saved these ships. Mitchell continued to argue the case that battleships were basically a thing of the past, and in the future modern aircraft would spell the death of the battleship. Mitchell was court-martialed in 1925 for insubordination and left the service a broken man, and died early in 1936. He would be honoured a few years later after his death by the naming of the B-25 Mitchell bomber in his name. And like Mitchell said, it would sink Japanese ships at sea. During the 1920s, the Washington Naval Treaty was signed by the victorious Allies from World War I to restrict the size and future battle fleets and size of battleships. Battleships would be restricted to no more than 35,000 tonnes and aircraft carriers no more than 27,000 tonnes, but were allowed to convert existing battleships and battle cruisers hulls of up to 33,000 tonnes to aircraft carriers, hence the size of CV-2 and CV-3 Lexington and Saratoga in the late 1920s. Everyone were good little boys, and new battleships in the 1930s were built to 35,000 tonnes, such as the US Navy's North Carolina class and the KG-5 class for the Royal Navy. But the Germans and Japanese were lying little tow rags, and they were planning massive ships. The Germans planned the 50,000 tonne Bismarck class and were even planning bigger ones up to 140,000 tonnes. The Japanese, cheeky little buggers, were planning 3 massive 70,000 tonne plus super battleships. In 1937, work started in Japan under absolute secrecy, and behind massive bamboo lattices covered with sacking to keep the nosy Parkers out, they managed to build 2 monstrous battleships almost 900 foot long, 127 foot at the widest at the beam, and with 9 massive 18-inch guns, the largest ever fitted to a battleship, and many 6 and 5-inch guns, plus secondary armaments, plus hundreds of lighter AA weapons. These ships topped out over 70,000 tonnes, but the world's military intelligence had no idea, in fact didn't even know their names until 1942, and then estimated the ships to be about 45,000 tonnes and the guns to be 16-inch, and they didn't find the actual size until they got Japanese records just after the war. Yamato entered Japanese fleet service in December 1941, and its sister Musashi in August 1942. The third sister, Shinayo, was not finished as a battleship but completed as a massive aircraft carrier. The Yamato, seen in the picture behind me, is a 1/10th model at the Japanese Yamato Museum. I think the Japanese, on the quiet, are quite proud of their monster battleship. Next to me is our massive 100 model of the Japanese Super Battleship Yamato, plus a quite big 1/350th from our Verifier brand, in which case down below we've got the Musashi. The Yamato would take part in the Battle of Midway as Admiral Yamamoto's flagship, and both the Yamato and its sister Musashi would take part in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, with the Musashi being sunk by aircraft with vast amounts of bombs and torpedoes. In April 1945, during the battle for Okinawa, the Yamato would meet its fate on its final mission, Operation Tengo, basically a massive kamikaze mission, to slam itself onto the beach at Okinawa to use its massive guns to blast the Allied forces trying to get onto Okinawa. Not long after the force left though, it was picked up by US seaplanes and submarines on recce duties. At 1000 hours, on the 7th of April 1945, US carrier forces launched some 350 aircraft to take out Yamato and its escort force. Behind me I'm showing clips from the movie The Great War of Archimedes and Yamato, both Japanese films about the Yamato, showing the effects of this massive ship succumbing to masses of aircraft, as predicted by Billy Mitchell. The first to go in were swarms of F-6F Hellcats and F-4U Corsairs, spraying the decks with their 50 caliber machine guns, trying to suppress the AA crews and kill the deck crews themselves. Next, the SB-2C L-divers, hitting the ship with 1,000-pound bombs and letting go with their 4 20mm cannons. This went on without a break for almost 3 hours, hitting the behemoth with about 20 bombs, leaving the massive ship in a terrible state. Also, Grumman TBM Avengers hit the ship with maybe 19 torpedoes, but concentrating only on their port side to make the massive ship list over beyond recovery point. As the ship rolled over, it's suspected that several of these torpedoes hit the weak underside of the ship as she rolled, and suddenly there was a massive explosion that ripped apart this ship. Some say maybe 3 kilotons, one of the largest non-nuclear explosions ever, sending almost 3,000 of her crew to their doom. Over 280 aircraft attacked this ship from 9 aircraft carriers, with another 100 providing air cover. In less than 40 years from the launch of HMS Dreadnaught, the largest and most terrifying weapon before the atomic bomb had succumbed to the grandchildren of the wooden stringy things that could hardly make a 100-metre flight. The Wright brothers and Curtiss formed Curtiss Wright, and it's one of their aircraft, the SB-2C Curtiss L-diver, that helped kill off Yamato and the Battleship. The Battleship would continue to serve until the late 90s with the United States Navy. They used their Iowa-class battleships, but these were then platforms for launching cruise missiles and provide command and control, plus using their massive 16-inch guns as ship-to-shore bombardment. In episode 7, we shall look at the Battle for Okinawa, one of the most bloodiest and tragic battles of World War II, that left the Allies with upwards of 85,000 casualties and over 150,000 civilian dead.